On today's World Insight, as the United Nations General Assembly buckles down to work, member states seek to chart a course toward global peace and development, such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals. On these and other top agenda, hear from Xu Haoliang, the UN Under-Secretary General, who's the acting UNDP Administrator, a part of the special series, United for the Future, the UN at 80.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian. Today, let's continue our special series of interviews and discussions on the United Nations and the future of global governance, United for the Future, the UN at 80. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. The 80th session of the UN General Assembly, or UNGA 80, is currently taking place in New York. Recently, the UN General Assembly endorsed a declaration on the peaceful settlement of the Palestine question and how to carry out the two-state solution with Israel. Some 142 countries of the 193 UN member states voted in favor of a resolution backing the declaration. The UN faces other challenges today, such as its tight budget. Ways to achieve sustainable development goals, besides bringing about reforms within the UN, are also top priorities. On these and more, recently I talked to Xu Haoliang, the UN Under-Secretary General, who is also the UNDP acting administrator based in New York. As the lead UN agency on international development, the UNDP works in 170 countries and territories to ease poverty and inequality, helping countries to achieve the SDGs. Take a listen at this interview. Mr. Xu, what a pleasure to see you here in New York.
Thank you. Very nice to see you again.
We have seen the latest report coming from IMF and the OECD suggesting the global economy is tilting down when it comes to growth rate rather than the other way around. What does that mean for the UN system, which is already struggling for resources?
This is really a very big question. We are seeing an unprecedented sort of a challenge that developing country economies are facing. And one of the key issues is related to development financing. Developing countries are facing what we call triple squeeze today. One is that the ODA is declining quite rapidly. And this year alone, we expect close to 15% decline of ODA in this year alone. And then, the other major challenge they're facing is the uncertainties caused by the tariffs, right? Because that causes imbalance in the global supply chain, in their domestic development planning, production, and the trading system. So they're facing a lot of challenges in this regard that affects their exports and their income and so forth. Right. So the third squeeze is the fiscal space that they now are facing, that is shrinking because of a high debt burden that they face, right? Because the interest rates are high, and that causes a very high, rate of debt servicing, and really reducing their fiscal space to invest. So these are real challenges that developing countries are facing that we try to work, to deal with.
Of course, your role of the United Nations Development Program is to work with the huge number of developing countries, especially the least developed economies. Having said that, though, UNDP is to celebrate the 60th anniversary soon. We have seen over the decades, UNDP has spearheading into diversifying your funding, which I guess at this moment is a very important how you have been doing it, and how can you share with the rest of the UN system?
So as you started, this is the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, right? And the UN was funded with three major mandates, right? Peace and stability, human rights, and development.
Yes.
Right? So in each of these areas, the UN has an important role to play. Right? Just to set the scene, for example, in peace and stability, one of the major interventions or support that the UN is providing is the peacekeeping missions and political missions. As we speak today, there are more than 20 political missions around the world and 11 peacekeeping missions around the world to support stability and peace. So this is one part of it. For development, I think the challenge is that we have an international framework for development. We have the Agenda 2030. We have the Sustainable Development Goals. But the latest report shows that only 35% of the targets are either on track or having moderate progress, modest progress. So this is what we're dealing with. So we, yes, have achieved great progress. I think the world is never, healthier, wealthier, and better off, than ever. But still, we have significant challenges in many areas of development. So this is the way, you're asking this question, which is important, what's next, right? So traditional development cooperation based on ODA is clearly not sufficient. So we have to develop new means of, financing development. So at this time, we know that there are $450 trillion worth of assets and wealth, right, in the world. The SDG financing gap every year is about $4 trillion. So the money is there. So the challenge is how do you align this, wealth and investment to the needs in developing countries so that we can, make progress faster and achieve, the kind of aspirations that people have for a better life.
But people also wonder about how efficient the work of development within the UN system has been done. I mean, this mentality and perception is directly linked to how the funding will be allocated, isn't it?
So I think, again, on this issue, the first question we need to focus on is, the national resources, right? Because the UN's contribution to, financial contribution to the development of developing countries is very, very small, right? And the vast majority of resources come from national sources and also from private sector. So this is why we work with many, many governments, more than 80 of them today, to implement what's called integrated national financing frameworks, which seeks to bring all sorts of financing together, from public domestic resources of taxation, right, from private domestic resources of private investment, but also from international ODA and the FDI, right? So it is this, effective use of this resource that's the most important. The UN is a catalyst for change, right? So UN can help a lot. In each of these areas, there's a policy issue. For example, how do you mobilize domestic resources through taxation? How do you use, taxation incomes more effectively, right, for your development outcomes, right, to support gender equality, for example, right? And how do you, prevent tax evasion by multilateral, corporations, right? So we're working with the OECD on an initiative called Taxation Without Borders, for example, right, to make sure that developing countries keep the income that they need, for their development. So this, I think, is what we're focusing on.
But Mr. Xu, I did get what you're trying to say, yet we see it's quite contagious these days about the rhetorics that global governance doesn't work anymore because we are in a very different world today. Do you buy that?
I think it's working. Right? It is working. Look at the peace and stability, right, side. There are challenges, clearly. We have more conflicts today than ever. But the UN is doing what it can do, right, with the authorization of member states. Right? I mentioned all these political missions, peacekeeping missions, right? And in human rights, again, the peer review of progress on human rights is a very effective mechanism where member states can comment on each other's, human rights, state, and provide recommendations on what needs to be done to improve, for example. So there's a mechanism that's working. On development, we do have a Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030, as a framework that all member states agreed, right? So this is what we have. So there are, of course, challenges in global governance. For example, many developing countries are not happy with the international financial architecture, right? So how financing decisions, right, are made on debt restructuring opportunities, right, mechanisms. So they're not entirely happy, but this is on the UN's agenda, right? So we have, for example, last year, the Pact for the Future that was adopted by the member states, right? It also has a Global Digital Compact, right? And also the Declaration for the Future Generation. So there are a lot of governance systems that are in the hands of member states that are there. So the challenge is how we can really forge, partnerships, right? Create a win-win situation for everyone, and make the current systems work. I think that's what we need to focus on.
There seems to be a lot of work on hand already, and there is a lot of also tools that can work eventually for those goals. And yet, whether people are using those tools for the right goals, that is a big question mark. It seems that's what you are trying to say. And yet, what about the work of UNDP, especially on the development? How do you think efficiency can be further improved? How to adjust those goals with your partners around the world in order to make them accurate and to the target?
UNDP was established 60 years ago, right? So we're, as you say, celebrating and commemorating of 60 years. And over the last 6 decades, we have achieved a lot with our member states. We often say that Singapore's development today, right, which is one of the richest and most developed countries in the world, its development journey started with a cooperation with the UNDP, where we co-developed its national development strategy in the 1960s, right? So the Romania, for example, the M1 subway line was designed with the UNDP technical support, right, in the 1970s as well. So many successes. But today, the world has changed. So the nature of development is more complex, interconnected, and it requires a different way of approach. Right? So this is where we're trying to be both responsive, right, and innovative. Right? So over the last few years, we're not just looking at how much money we spend. We spend about $5 billion a year, but we're trying to leveraging this funding. Right? So over the last 4 years, with $5 billion a year, so $20 billion, we have leveraged $870 billion of development financing. Right? That is to align public and private financing to development objectives, right. Not the money we spend, but the country spend for development. So there are a lot of things that we can contribute.
From peace and development to sustainable development goals,
各国要以改革创新激发发展潜力。
The UN has been a key stage for international governance and common aspirations. As the UN embraces its 80th anniversary, it's also becoming a crucial goal to understand where the world is heading for. Join us for interviews and discussions on the UN and the future of international governance. Actually, UNDP has been spearheading on some of the innovative ways, not only to solicit funding, but also to make sure it goes into the projects that we have learned. Innovation seems to be the key these days. How much ready is UNDP in terms of developing with the developing countries on innovation?
With internal innovation, for example, right? We have looked at our process systems and the capacities. And for example, for every dollar we receive, 91 cents goes to development. For 19 years, we've had a strict, clean audit for our financial management. But on the development side, I think that's really the key, right? Because there are two types of innovation, I would say. One is single point solutions to a specific problem, right? Do things that was not done before, right? In ways that were not done before. Try new solutions, right? For example, when you put a camera on the plane, right? You have innovation. Your plane was innovation, camera was innovation. But you put them together is another innovation. This is one type of innovation. We do this every day. It is part of our DNA. But this is not sufficient. So a new type of innovation we're advocating is called strategic innovation, right? That is looking at the problems with a systems change lens. You look at the problems in a portfolio of interventions, right? For example, on climate change, right? This cannot be solved by one ministry, one sector of the economy, one part of the government, right? The whole society have to work together. So how do you deal with this kind of issue is something that we're advocating and we're actually practicing. In more than 100 countries, we have now built our capacity for this kind of strategic approach to innovation, combining single point solutions, small scale solutions to particular problem with the kind of strategic view of the innovation that we need for policy. So I think so many countries, their development contexts are different, right? But the principles of what works, I think permeates across different contexts.
The discussion that we're having today, Mr. Xu, is really the discussion that's the key, I hope, I believe, that for future development of global governance. But on the other hand, you see the world is, or at least part of the global politics is heading toward another direction. If you read the headlines, the fiascos every day. So there seems to be a disconnect between what we are talking about here in this office and what some of the capitals are very enthusiastic about. So how do you see this gap? And as a result, where is UNDP heading for?
Let's look at what we can do to achieve together. Right? I think that's really what, in my view, gives me the hope.
Who is included in this together?
Yeah, so let me give you some examples. In 1980s, right, there was a crisis of some sort, right, because the ozone layer was depleting, right, and the consequence is that the skin cancer among population, for example, will grow, right, and it goes beyond, right, the danger of the ozone depletion, right. The international communities came together, right, adopted what's called the Montreal Protocol, right, as part of the international convention, right. So since mid-1980s, more than $4 billion was invested, more than 8,000 projects were implemented. And today, 99% of the ozone depleting materials, CFCs, right, and other ozone harming materials have been removed from production, right? So we solved what looked like an intractable problem, right?
So it seems that, Mr. Xu, you're saying, let those fiascos go on, let them not mind our business.
The right way to say that there are a lot of challenges, but let's work together to focus our energy on issues where we can make a difference. Development is an important part of the solution to peace and stability and to achieve human rights. What are human rights we're talking about? We're talking about rights to education, health, right? To having your views heard, for example, right? To a world where there's no discrimination, there's equality, right? So how do you achieve these rights? The best way to achieve it, right, is through sustainable human development, where everybody will have more choices. Why do we have so many conflicts? It's because of lack of development.
But it's no secret that some of the nations that were crucial in establishing the current global governance system has been apparently losing interest in it. So what does that mean for you? And what does that mean for that quote unquote together?
No, it's a very good question again, right? So the fact is that look at the UNDP. UNDP is a collective of member states, right? Despite the challenges, right, many member states from both developed country, traditional donors, and from developing countries, our so-called our program countries, are all contributing to UNDP's resource base, right? And not only developed countries that are still contributing, right? Nearly 100 developing countries are contributing, right, to the work of UNDP in their own countries, right? So I think so we need to look at what's working, right? Make it work better. That's what I would focus my energy on, right? There are platforms for multilateral action, and multilateral action, once if they're committed to and supported and empowered, produces results.
Let me just throw in an example since we talk about innovation. Artificial intelligence, of course, is in the headlines all the time, and there is a huge danger, Mr. Xu, as you know, maybe better than many of us. There is likely to be another AI divide.
Yes.
It is already happening.
It is.
So what is going to be the things that you and your teams are doing in order to at least reduce that possibility?
We'll try. The world is not equal, unfortunately, when it comes to digital inclusion, right? 2.6 billion people, or a third of the world, don't have access to internet today, right? So when it comes to AI, it presents both, promise, but also risks, right? And when it comes to investment in AI, for example, we're talking about hundreds of billions of investment in most advanced, economies in the world, right? In some of the, capable, large middle-income countries, we're talking about investments in the size of hundreds of $millions. It's a scale, right, difference, right, already. Then in most small developing countries, we're talking about single-digit or at best a double-digit investments in AI. So this is the kind of pictures we're seeing. So yes, the point you point out is really the risk is real. What can UN do, right? So UN, Secretary General has organized a high-level body, right, for AI, right? UNESCO, for example, has worked a lot on ethics of AI use. ITU, right, has worked a lot on many aspects, right, of AI use, especially the technology side, right? And so we're working with the ITU, right, UNESCO, together with Secretary General, to look at 3 levels of things that we can do, right? One is policy, right, to ensure that AI use, right, is supportive of achievement of human development. That's very important, right? The second is issue we look at is so-called infrastructure, right? To build the digital public, infrastructure, to build, for example, the policies, governance systems that are necessary to use AI responsibly. And the third layer, level of work is capacity development, right? To help our developing countries to have the capabilities. So we're supporting more than 50 countries today, right, with what we call the AI Sprint, to really support our developing countries. So risks are real, but again, there's something we can do, right, to make the situation better, right? And the AI is complex, right? You have an input, you for average user, you see the input layer, you see the output layer, you don't see anything in between, right? So how do you, really reap the promise of this, but also manage risks of this, right? It's something we really focus a lot on. But we have to take advantage of the promise of the AI, right? In economy, in society, right? They can produce wonders, to improve efficiency, right? Help us, do innovation faster, find the solutions to health challenges and other development challenges.
China, as a developing country, is one passionate about innovation and new technologies. How can UNDP tap into the resources and possibility of cooperation with China to serve many of the aspects of innovation?
We're already working with the Chinese government very closely, right? Both for development inside China, right? But also to use South-South cooperation as a means, right, for China to support the development in other developing countries. One initiative we're working on is in the areas of early warning, right, for climate and the natural disaster-related, challenges in many small developing countries, right? So with China's development aid, agency, right, and also with the support of the Ministry of Commerce, which is our, focal point, right, in China. So we're working with now 10 developing countries, right, to support, adoption of early warning innovations, right, systems, in these countries, right. And we're also working with the Peace and Development Fund that China has set up in the UN, right, in other areas of work, for example, in the areas of plastics pollution, which is very important, right? For example, in the areas of anti-terrorism, right, through dealing with misinformation, right, and engaging young people, in positive, engagement in society and so forth. So there are many things we can do. And we're working with many governments to set up, policy centers in different countries. With Turkey, for example, right, we have a center in Istanbul that focuses on involving private sector in development.
Global Development Initiative that is raised as a suggestion from China, but shared by many countries of the UN member countries. How do you see that could provide more momentum in terms of the cooperation that you mentioned and in terms of the togetherness that you just suggested?
The Global Development Initiative is a part of the global development effort, I would say, right? Because the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General have both, made public statements in support of the Global Development Initiative. And the UN has also set up a working group, right, to see how, we can support the Global Development Initiative's potentials. But not only that, it also looks at how, we can work with other initiatives, such as global gateways of the European Union, right? So I think as long as, specific development initiatives, bilateral initiatives, or multilateral initiatives that are beneficial for the interest of developing countries, UNDP embraces it, right? So we needed to really work together, as you said, right? Really work together, find ways that can achieve, results and the development impact for developing countries that really need, support.
80th anniversary of the United Nations, of course, for the UNDP, it's also going to be 60th anniversary. Congratulations. What will be the key words in the mind of yours and your colleagues?
Multilateralism, right, once supported and empowered, produces the positive results we want. Let's really make it work.
Not throw the baby out together with the bathwater.
Definitely not.
Mr. Xu, what a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much once again for hosting us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of my teams in New York and in Beijing, thanks for being with us. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.